Dear brothers, good morning. Happy Thursday, boys. All right, off the rails this morning. So we've talked on here a few different times about the fact that I am a big fan of science fiction-y books, fantasy type books. I know. What can I say? Love Game of Thrones series. Anything to do with dragons, I am pretty much always into. I've read all sorts of books already this year that fall under that line. And I'm currently reading a book called Against All Gods by Miles Cameron. And so it's a very convoluted book. I will admit it's been kind of hard to follow. However, there's a passage in there. There's this group of people called the Hakrans. And they are pacifists. They don't fight. They don't do any kind of violence. They don't own weapons. They don't own swords. They trade. And they have good ships. And that's pretty much it. They avoid violence at all costs. It's against them. They have this belief that they don't get reincarnated, essentially, if they produce violence. And so what's interesting about all of this is that they have this conundrum. So essentially, Against All Gods, the whole book is essentially about corrupt gods that are represented by kind of your typical mythological gods. There's a god who represents Zeus, whose name is something else, and then kind of down the line, and they oppress all of the people that live surrounding them on Earth. And this group of mortals is essentially trying to overthrow the gods. And there's this conversation where eventually the Hakrans are having to figure out what they're going to do, because their mindset is, we're just going to continue to run away from all the violence. We're going to hide. We're going to be good people. And as long as we stay away from all of the violence and bad stuff, we'll be okay. But we don't partake in this stuff. It's not what we do. We can't be violent. We don't want to fight. We just want to have peace and do our thing. And finally, one of the people who's essentially trying to overthrow the gods is like, hey, if you guys agree that the world is in great danger and the gods are these big bad oppressors and they're harming us and hurting us, and you're deciding that like you want to do nothing about it, you have no duty to act, then, and I quote, you have to admit that being very sad about the fate of all the slaves will not free them. And I know this may be a convoluted message this morning, but just hear me out on my point. Just because you feel bad about the happenings of the world, the happenings of your family, doesn't change anything. And I think that as men, we get caught up in the fact that, oh, we'll just bide our time and stay in the shadows. And as long as we just kind of, we're going to stay out of it. We don't want to ruffle any feathers because, we just want to be kind of passive. And I don't want to upset my neighbors or my family or the world, or I don't want people yelling at me. So here's the question that we have to ask. And I had to ponder this myself as I kind of read this yesterday. And that's this. If we know that something is wrong in our heart, it's not hard. You look at something and you go, this is evil, this is wrong, this is base, this is immoral. Then by all senses of the word, it is our duty to do something against that. That's our calling. Our job is to protect, lead, work, keep. We talk about this every day. So if we know that something is wrong, and yet we remain passive, we stay, that's getting into the realm of danger right there. That's kind of a weird thing. Well, we're just not being men. Because eventually you have to act. You have to be, maybe if it isn't physical violence, but you do have to do something. You have to make a stand for what you believe in. And what I have found is that most men includes myself. I will not preclude myself from this conversation. Are afraid to have those conversations about things we know are wrong because we're afraid for the kickback we're going to receive for it. We're afraid that if we get involved, there's going to be bad things that happen. And, maybe there is. Maybe we are going to face rebuttals and strife. We may not have to face actual violence, although, as all of you know, I'm a giant advocate for the fact if you need to be violent, you need to be capable of violence. Lord willing, you'll never have to be, but you should be capable. But the real main point today is I think often we want to be passive when the world needs us to be men of action. We want to stay out of the light. We don't want to ruffle feathers. We want to try and be, say the right things and be like, oh, I disagree with that, but I don't really want to get in anybody's way. I don't want to offend anybody. It's just flat wrong. All of us know that many things around us are wrong. They are immoral. They are against logic. They just aren't right. And yet so few of us speak out about it out of certainly a fear, maybe of retribution of what could happen. Maybe it's just a fear that people will judge us, or a fear that we're going to have to deal with blowback. It could be a fear of a lot of things. But I think probably the greatest fear is that if you take that stance, you then have to defend it. You have to protect it. You have to go forth and be like, yeah, this is the hill I'm going to die on. And I think most of us, this includes myself, have struggled immensely with that or avoid it completely. We're like the Hackrons in that book who are like, we don't do violence. We don't fight. We stay away from stuff. We just try to survive, and that's how we roll. I must say that as I talk about it with you guys this morning, nothing seems more foolish, nothing seems more cowardly than to avoid what we need to be doing and facing in the world. If we know that something is wrong and we're in the right in fighting against that, what would make you stop? And I think that stopping point is a fear that we would then be responsible for that opinion and we would have to defend it and fight it. But I think that the men listening to this understand that. But I think a lot of us just say, I'll stay on the outside. I just don't want to create any difficulties or issues or have people yelling at me, or it's going to hurt my business, or it's going to hurt this or that. And I think the part of this that strikes me most is that what that tells me more than anything, especially for those of you that are God-fearing men, what are we to fear down here if we feel like something is immoral and wrong? Whose judgment do I care about? Men? Humans? I care about their feelings towards me and an opinion that I hold? Or should I care about God's opinion? Should I care about the biblical opinion of what this looks like? If I know something is immoral and wrong, and I do nothing about it, am I doing nothing about it because I'm afraid of what people down here are going to think, or what God thinks? Because I'm pretty sure it doesn't take a rocket scientist to realize this. When you stand against evil, when you proclaim against evil, when you fight against evil, that's kind of God's playbook. It's all written down there. Those are the plays. They're all designed around fighting evil here on earth. So it begs the question of, what are we worshiping down here? And why are we afraid of what other mortals think when we know that the evil that's happening needs to be stood against? We can no longer be passive when it comes to evil stuff in the world. That's all there is to it. We can't sit around and sit idly while bad things happen around us. It brings to mind just the amount of sex trafficking, pedophilia, stuff against children specifically. All of us, especially listening to this right now, the amount of anger that actions that happen against children creates is, I'm not sure there's really words for it. It feels beyond the pale, because you just can't fathom to yourself how somebody could harm a child. And yet we see it all over the place. And yet so many of us don't do a whole lot. Maybe we say we do, we speak it, but we don't call it out. We're not pointing it out as much as we should. And certainly we don't vote necessarily for people that are pointing it out. There are a few, and I give them a lot of praise for doing that. But I think for all of us listening to this, when you know something is wrong, anything that affects those that are weaker, children specifically, but anything that we know is immoral and wrong, and you decide that you're just going to wait it out and hopefully it'll pass over, eventually it's going to come to your door in some capacity. And you will have had no experience fighting it. You will not be ready for it. And at that point, you'll be outnumbered. And, evil just grows and grows and grows. And the only rebuttal to that is the men listening to this right now. It's good people. It's godly people who are like, no, we won't allow this. We won't allow this for our children. We've talked on here a lot about leaving a legacy. What more can you do than fight the evils of today so that your children hopefully don't have to suffer those same things when they grow up? What more purpose could you have in life? That could be your sole purpose in life, is to fight the evils of today so that your children don't have to. And so I want all of you today to walk away with this knowledge. We cannot be passive in this world. You cannot sit on the sidelines and just watch as bad things unfold and do nothing about it. It doesn't mean you have to go become a politician. It doesn't mean you have to start a nonprofit. It means individually as a man, when these things present themselves. I'll give you a simple example. You're out to dinner with a couple of people, and topics come up that you're just like, I disagree with that. You need to be able to speak that and defend it. So the first part of this, really more than anything, is if you think something is wrong, educate yourself on it. Why is it wrong? Why do I think this is wrong? What is the rebuttal to this? What is the opposite of it? What is the moral? What is the noble way to explain this to somebody in a way that's not necessarily argumentative, but it is declarative. It is confident. Because at the end of the day, words are very powerful. They run this whole world. People start wars based on emotions and words. And so understand this morning, fellas, if you have something that you disagree with, is wrong, educate yourself further on it. Be able to defend your point in whatever the topic is. And then don't be afraid to have that conversation, or maybe not, being afraid is the wrong term. Fear is normal. But don't allow that fear to stop you from speaking to others and making actionable steps to rebuff that evil. Fear can't do that to us. We can't sit in the corner anymore like the people of the book I spoke about and just hope that it all willy-nilly goes away. You have to be actionable. And most of that action comes down to your knowledge and wisdom, and then getting that out to the world, not being afraid to speak that to people. If they don't like it, they don't like it. That's okay. But most people today are putting out things that they think are right just because they want to be a part of a group. No. You need to be putting things out that you believe in wholeheartedly, that you can defend, that you don't have to get all emotional about when you're defending it. You can be very matter of fact. You can be kind even in those conversations. But the world is full of bad stuff. And the people that are made to fight that are the men listening to this right now. My buddy and I were just talking yesterday about the fact that societies fall when men stop leading. It's just the way it is. History's undefeated. when men fall apart, when they are no longer having purpose, when they are not leading, the world goes to shit. And so one of the ways you lead is by fighting against bad stuff. You fight against the evil aspects of this world. And we can't be afraid to do that anymore, fellas. The time for that has come, and it is well gone. The world is in a ungreat place at the moment. And the men listening to this have to be the way that it gets out of that. And we do that by being knowledgeable on topics and being willing to fight against what is wrong. I'll leave it at that before I get any more long-winded this morning. I love you all. God bless. Be strong. Let's get after it the rest of this week. Have a great day, gents. We'll see you.